I really enjoyed the miniseries Tales of the Jedi, but more than anything, I love how much attention it gave to Count Dooku and his fall to the dark side. Dooku's kind of a weird character in Star Wars. He doesn't get a ton to do in the movies, it kind of feels like he was just thrown in. But in Clone Wars, he's a really cool character. Maybe not the best villain, because Maul does exist. But that episode where he's chained to Anakin and Obi-Wan is awesome. So finally getting a more in-depth look at what caused his turn from being trained by Yoda to the dark side is really interesting. That's a pretty steep drop-off, and like Anakin, he's not totally wrong in his motivations. So let's take a look. The first hint we get of Dooku's eventual turn comes in Episode 2, Justice, which sees Dooku and Qui-Gon try to save a senator's son who has been taken captive. Only, it turns out that the son doesn't blame his captors at all, for his father has let the planet fall into poverty for his own gain. Dooku sides with the people of the captors as well, and when told by the senator that the Jedi serve the Senate, he says,
"No, we serve the people of this republic."
He's infuriated by the senator's corruption and nearly chokes him to death, which is obviously a very dark side thing to do. But the really interesting part of this, Dooku's frustrations with the Jedi Order itself, comes in the next episode. Dooku and Mace Windu are sent to retrieve the body of a murdered Jedi, only for Dooku to investigate further and find that the Jedi was not murdered by unknown enemies, but the people of the town. Their senator was selling off the planet's natural resources against the will of the citizens and reaping the reward while the planet suffered. The rebels murdered the Jedi so that they could blackmail the senator and get him to advance their own agenda, one that would help their people since the Senate had not yet worked for them. Dooku empathizes with the rebels because even though, as he says, their methods obviously cannot stand, they did have a just reason to be angry with the Senate and their system as a whole. But the real problem comes when Dooku learns that Windu, who sided with the Senate and therefore was against investigating the murder, was being rewarded with a Senate seat of his own. It shows how, in Dooku's mind, the Jedi as a whole have become too beholden to the Senate rather than to the people at large, who they are supposed to be protecting. They have become lapdogs of the corrupt Senate instead of peacekeepers, just like the senator from the first story claimed. And it's this disillusionment with what the Jedi have become that pushes Dooku down the path of the dark side, as instead of trying to change the Jedi from within, like Qui-Gon did, he thinks the whole system needs to be overturned. Speaking of Qui-Gon, who by the way does not get enough screen time in Star Wars, we get to see the aftermath of his death. Dooku feels somewhat responsible for what happened, as he's already secretly working for Palpatine at this point. However, he feels it's too late for him to go back, so he fully commits to the dark side by killing Master Yaddle, despite her pleading with him to go back and make things right. She says he was correct about so many things concerning the Jedi Council, and even offers to work with him to make change, but it's too late for Dooku. And that's what makes his fall to the dark side so interesting to me. He wasn't totally motivated by Qui-Gon Jinn dying or some traumatic event. Instead, he understood the fundamental problem with the Jedi Order and had to watch those problems get progressively worse over time. You could make the case that up until that point, it's really more of a political problem for him. But at a certain point, you can't go home anymore, and whether or not it may be true, Dooku believed this about himself. And while you can certainly see and even agree with Dooku's criticisms of the Jedi organization, just like in the first story, his methods of fixing this problem cannot stand. Murdering someone is typically not a very nice thing to do, and ultimately Dooku chose to become evil, no matter how justified his actions may seem from a distance. You can't claim to want peace and just to fix an organization while you're slicing Jedi's heads off and indirectly facilitating the murder of your own Padawan. Let me know if this made any sense. Please have your own interpretations, and go watch the Tales of the Jedi if you haven't already. Well, you might want to skip the first episode, that's just my opinion. Thank you.